Hello and welcome to Brewers Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by Kalshi. Use promo code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. I'm Dave Gasper here on a Tuesday show. The Milwaukee Brewers get the win over the Cincinnati Reds on Monday night. We got to talk about Brandon Woodruff, got to talk about the plans for the rotation. Also, we found out some of the names coming to the Brewers alumni game next month. We'll get into that later on here as well. But we got to start with the big story here. Big Woo, Brandon Woodruff making his triumphant return to the Brewers rotation after 6 weeks being on the IL, had that dead arm issue in his start at American Family Field. Velo all of a sudden 83, 84. You get very concerned, and so he ends up being on the IL and working his way back slowly but surely. And he comes back, and Brandon Woodruff did not skip a beat. My goodness, 6 innings, 1 hit, no runs, 10 punchies, 10 strikeouts, the 21st career 10 strikeout game for Brandon Woodruff. He's fine. He looked completely fine. He was sitting about 88, 91 in the first inning, but then was able to ramp it up as the game went along, hitting a couple of 94s. I think he got up to 95 once, but able to get that velo back up there as he got going, got into a groove. Classic, vintage Brandon Woodruff that we saw right there. You would not have believed that he missed the last 6 weeks with dead arm, the way that he was looking. Absolutely fantastic stuff there from Big Woo, carrying a perfect game into the 6 innings. 5 1/3 perfect innings to start this game. Went through in order, shutting these guys down, was very efficient as he always has been before giving up a single to Tyler Stevenson with 1 out in the 6th. But man, that had to feel really good for Woody to not only get back out there, but to be able to shove like we know that he can. I mean, he just knows how to pitch. Even when the velo ain't there, even when he may not have his best stuff anymore, he is able to get guys out. He's able to mix and match and locate, and that keeps hitters off balance. He does a very, very good job of that. That's why he is able to stick around. That's why he's so important to this team, to this young rotation, to teach them those kinds of things. Even though you have guys that can throw 104 and ramp it up to that rather than ramping up to 94, but still, Brandon Woodruff is just continuing to show why he is the respected veteran atop this staff, and that I'm just so happy for him to be able to have that kind of an outing. And he had to go toe for toe there against Brady Singer, who was shutting down the Brewers offense there. This game went into extra innings without a single run scored, which is incredibly unusual for Great American Small Park, and very tough for the Kalshi line we were looking at yesterday with the over on total runs. You know, especially since Singer has an ERA over 5, but I digress. Anyways, we'll get back on it later on here, but still, for Brandon Woodruff to be able to have that kind of an outing, truly impressive for his first start back in the big leagues after dealing with an issue of dead arm over there. So great for him. But also, Pat Murphy talked about, okay, what does this mean for the rotation now that Brandon Woodruff is back? Because if you had a couple of guys in there for that group, and they've done really well, so who do you push out? Well, they didn't say specifically, but Pat Murphy did say that they do plan on going back to a 5-man rotation as the Brewers move forward with Brandon Woodruff back in the fold now. So that's likely going to mean one of the 2 lefties in that group moving back into a relief role, either that being Shane Drowan or potentially Robert Gasser. My guess is probably Drowan, but also Drowan is slated to start later in this series against the Reds. So, yeah, that's... It's kind of still vague and up in the air. Brandon Sproat, it sounds like, is going to remain in the rotation, despite some of the struggles that he's had. Shane Drowan has been in that relief role before. Robert Gasser, not quite as much. But, those are the possibilities I think the Brewers are looking at, because when the Brewers activated Woodruff here, they sent down Drew Rom from the bullpen. And Drew Rom was that second left-hander out there alongside Aaron Ashby. Now, the Brewers have liked operating with multiple lefties out in the bullpen in recent years. A lot of injuries to that lefty group this year. Angel Zerpa, Rob Z, Jared Koenig. A lot of those guys that they've been hurt. So that's really hit into their left-handed depth. And so They're down to just Aaron Ashby in there right now with Drowan and Gasser in the rotation. So it's got to be one of those two that ends up getting moved back into that relief role. Again, my guess would be Drowan just because he has that experience, having that bulk relief role, being out of the bullpen this year. He got moved in there kind of due to necessity and due to him pitching well. And he has continued to pitch well in that starting rotation. So it does make it a bit of a bummer for him to get sent back to that bullpen role. But at the same time, it's Brandon Woodruff. Sorry, dude, you're going to lose that battle. Brandon Woodruff is going to get that spot. And with Murphy wanting to go with that 5-man rotation, that's the route that they are going to go. It is interesting, though, to me that they wanted to go with a 5-man group going forward, because after the off day on Thursday here, the Brewers have a stretch of 18 games in 17 days heading into the All-Star break. So that Thursday is their last off day before the All-Star break, and they've been known to give these guys, an extra day of rest here and there when they can. So a 6-man rotation really didn't feel out of the question or out of the ordinary here for the Brewers going through that stretch. But it seems like they're going to go with that 5-man plan for the time being here and see how things stretch out. And you do have a couple of those bulk guys in the bullpen, such as your Chad Patrick, and again, likely Shane Drowan, but that hasn't been confirmed quite yet in terms of the Brewers' plans for him. But still, you do have the bulk guys back there. You can cover multiple innings. You can kind of have some tandem starts if you need to give some of these guys a bit of a breather out in that bullpen, because it's going to be a grueling stretch to try and get to the All-Star game that they have coming up on the schedule. So those are kind of where things are. That they're still in flux with that rotation, but you get Brandon Woodruff back. The guys who have been in that rotation have filled in pretty admirably. So that kind of puts the Brewers in a bit of a spot where you're going to have to technically demote someone who has pitched well enough to not be demoted, but just with the numbers game, they're going to have to shift roles a little bit there, with Drew Rom being the guy that gets sent out to the minor league. So that's going to be something that will play out here over the coming days as we watch things go along. And we can also watch things go along every single game on Kalshi, where you can trade every single game all year long. And, again, we talked about the over for this first game, over 9.5 runs scored. Did not come even close to that in this game. But, hey, we got to get back on it the next day, because there's so many great opportunities here. And, I'm just kind of looking straight up here for a Brewers win. Because that's really the most important thing, that the Brewers are able to get the win here. The Brewers currently trading at a 52% chance to win this game against Cincinnati Reds. You got Brandon Sproat on the mound, and I know that doesn't inspire a ton of confidence in a lot of people, but also Nick Lodolo on the mound, who hasn't been very good for Cincinnati either. So this is going to be a very good opportunity for the Brewers once again. The Reds have not been playing well, so I'm liking the Brewers at 52% chance to win this game, which means a $100 trade pays out $180 with a win. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, use promo code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10, Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything. All right, moving on now to kind of one of the fun events. Now, we saw this last year with the Alumni Home Run Derby, but now the Brewers are kind of doing a bit more of an old-timers game, an alumni game that they're going to have this year coming up in July, on July 24th. So that's what the Brewers have coming up, and they announced on Monday morning the rosters that are going to be playing in this game. And my goodness, is this a loaded group that they have? So as I pull it up here, I mean, this is really something incredible. And we're starting off strong with Jesus Aguilar, Chase Anderson, Ryan Braun, of course, going to be there. Jeff Bianchi, who is actually a big part of the Brewers scouting department now, but former utility infielder. Brad Boxberger is going to be there. Doug Davis, Double D, back in action. Very excited for that. Tim Dillard, of course. Giovanni Gallardo, Bill Hull, Corey Hart, all the classics from your childhood or from that golden era of Brewers baseball. Jeremy Jeffress is back. Jeff Jenkins is back. Eric Kratz of foul territory as well there. He is back. Corey Knebel is going to be there. Danny Cobb. Any Danny Cobb fans out there? Let's go. He's going to be back in action. George Kataris. Brooks Kieschnick. Okay, the guy who paved the way for Shohei Ohtani. Okay, Brooks Kieschnick walked so that Shohei Ohtani could run. Brandon Kinsler, Jonathan Lucroy, Nigel Morgan, T. Plush is going to be back in action. Mike Moustakas, Chris Narveson, Jace Peterson, Manny Pena, the Pineapple is going to be back. Richie Sexton is going to be there. Travis Shaw, Ben Sheets, Eric Sogard, Eric Thames, Carlos Villanueva, Randy Wolf, and the managers for this alumni game, Eddie Cedar and Garth Orge. So, I mean, you have got a loaded roster here for the Alumni Legends game. And again, that game is going to be coming up on July 24th. That's going to be a 3 o'clock start time for the actual Brewers game that day. And then after that game is done is going to be the Alumni Legends game afterwards. That's why you have a 3 o'clock afternoon start for that one. So you might want to put in the request to be off of work now, just to make sure you can be there, because that is going to be a huge game, 100%. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then final note here, final bit of news to talk about. Luis Rengifo, who was designated for assignment last week so that the Brewers could call up Cooper Pratt. He is now on release waivers. So after going through getting designated for assignment, you can be put on outright waivers, which means the Brewers are trying to keep you in the organization, outright in AAA. Or release waivers, in which case he would be released and become a free agent. So he has not yet cleared release waivers, so there is a potential for someone else to claim or try and work something out for Luis Rengifo. Again, if there is a trade or something to be made, it's certainly not going to be much for Rengifo, but that is still working out its process. But the Brewers are not looking to keep him around, and stash him in AAA if that possibility were there. They're just straight up outright release him. Now, if you remember Luis Matos, who the Brewers acquired earlier in the season, and he played a couple of games before getting designated for assignment, he was put on outright waivers and has been outrighted and remains in AAA Nashville with the Brewers. So the Brewers could technically call upon Matos again if the need arises, which I really don't think they're planning on calling on Luis Matos anytime soon anyways. But still, he is still around in the organization. Luis Rengifo, by the time this whole process is done, is not going to be. The Brewers are going to end up releasing him, provided no one claims him. But that process is still in the middle of working out. So when we do have a resolution on that, we'll be talking about it here, as we always do on Brewers Daily. I'll also be talking about it on Twitter as well, at dgasper24, if you don't follow me already over there. Appreciate all of you watching and listening, and we'll see you again next time for another episode of Brewers Daily.